On the other hand, if I return to my own dear country, my fine renown will have perished, but my life will long endure, and the end of death will not find me anytime soon. So it's all about that sort of chaos, right? Fame, thirst for fame, thirst for chaos. A concept that is very, we can associate with chaos. They're different concepts, but hugely important, both of them, to heroes, is that of honor. Now, instinctively, we understand what honor is, right? You're honored, you're famous, you're honored, you receive some sort of honors. But there is something particular about how honor is so crucial to an archaic society and to the Homeric society in particular. Achilles again says, I will not, I think, yield to Atreus' son Agamemnon, nor to the other Danaans, since gratitude there was none for my battling against the enemy without any respite. Equal the lot of the skulker and the bravest fighter, courage and cowardice rank the same in honor. He is preoccupied with this. Later on, don't be too eager to go battling on without me against the war-loving Trojans, you diminish my honor. He is concerned so deeply with that issue of honor. So what is really honor? I mean, we understand it. In broad terms, we all understand it. But what did it entail for the Greeks? It's a system of values. It's a system of values, right? This system of values allows us to socialize, allows them and allows us to socialize, to function in groups. Think about yourselves. If you're in this classroom, you think, I'm a part of this group, I'm respectful, I do what I'm told, I don't interfere, this is the way I deserve to be treated, right? When you come into this classroom, we all have this notion in our head, this is the way I deserve to be treated, this is the way I want to be treated, because I'm a valued member of this class. This is the basic concept that underlines honor in a Homeric society. There is an economy of esteem, there's an economy of honor. Everyone desires honor, everyone desires to be respected, and in the Greek society, honored. And this kind of honor is supplied by others in varying degrees. So sometimes you feel that someone paid you the right amount of honor, sometimes you'll feel that you were too much, like honored too much, and sometimes you feel that you were not honored enough. And that is where problems start, where problems begin. So it should be, in theory, a dynamic and inclusive thing, but it may result in a lot of problems. But before we look at the problem, so what does it translate into? What does honor mean? What does this value mean? It's essentially being valued in one's own eyes. I think that I deserve this. I think I am a valuable member of this community. But I also want you to think that I am a valuable member of this community. So in a society like Homer's, how do you gain honor? You gain honor by being great in battle, right? If you're excellent in warfare, you gain honor. You gain honor for things that you don't necessarily have anything to do with. Your rank, if you're a king, if you're a general, that entitles you to an amount of honor. If you're wealthy, just being wealthy, that means you should be honored, you should be respected. If you're of noble birth, again, things that have nothing to do with what you do. If you're older than others, that entitles you to some sort of honor. And again, skill or profession and kinship, all these things sort of entitle you. What does that translate into? How is that honor expressed? What do you gain when you're honored? Stuff. You get freebies, you get material goods, you get spoils of war, you get first picks. You get the choice cuts of meat. You'll find, if you read the Iliad, meat comes up so often that the best of food goes for the best of warriors, or the most honorable ones. You get great wine, you get land, you get gifts, and you get prizes. But also, obviously, perhaps the most important one is the non-material forms of honor. So, being gazed at in admiration, or getting the best seat at the table, or being greeted by everyone around you respectfully. So, of course, the major issue in the Iliad is Briseis, that Briseis is taken away from Achilles. That means his honor is being taken away because his prize, which was so important to him, is being taken away. I'm not going to spend much time on Nestor because He's quite boring, but the point he's trying to make here is, I'm old, he says. In his lifetime already 2 generations of mortals had passed away, those raised with him and their offspring in sacred Pylos, and now he was king over the third. So he's this massive figure, very, very old, and that should entitle him to particular kinds of honor, because he has the right to offer advice, because of his age and experience, because he's got the authority, and as a result he's trying to uphold group values. He tells powerful figures what to do. He is a needed figure. So to sum it all up, before we move into the Odyssey, in the Iliad, honor, kleos is one massively important concept. Honor is the second one. And the ensuing issue, the fight between Achilles and Agamemnon, is a fight for honor. It is a fight between, sort of a disagreement between rank and prowess. Because both entitle you to honor, right? Being a king or being a general, that means you should be honored. But also if you're a great fighter, that also means you should be honored. There's a plurality of claims to honor then, is what I'm trying to say. Of course, there's a limit imposed by the honors you owe others, right? So you also have to honor others. You cannot just enjoy all the honor. You cannot always enjoy the respect. You have to pay back. You have to respect back. And that is when the problems begin, because people can arbitrarily manipulate this kind of concept and this idea to their own benefit. So kleos, we have honor. What else do the heroes have, or rather, what do they lack? You'll often find that they lack self-control. You find people, characters, servants, gods, quite often stepping in and trying to tell them, you should control yourself now. This is the painting with Athena, who's trying to grab Achilles from his hair and tells him, do not do anything silly, do not kill Agamemnon. So heroes often lack self-control. And most importantly, they're very happy to give in to their emotions. Remember, the first line of the Iliad is about wrath, is about anger. This is a poem about extreme emotions. This is about anger. So they want fame, they want to be respected, they don't really like to be controlled, and they give in to their emotions. That's what we get from the Iliad when it comes to heroes. But let's turn now to the Odyssey that I've been told you've just finished studying, which is excellent. So, quick comparison with the Iliad. Obviously, different poems, right? Very different poems. One is about a time of war, the other one's about a time of peace, although peace with a pinch of salt. One is focused on Troy, the other one is around the entire Mediterranean. They end on different notes, although we can draw connections between the two. They end different notes. You know very well how the Odyssey ends. We talked about the Iliad and how it ends with a dead body, a corpse being returned to his father, Hector, to Priam. But of course, what's also very different is what we're talking about today, the nature of heroism. We should start by looking at Odysseus in the Iliad. Odysseus is a hero, undeniably. He's a great fighter. He is a great fighter. We do see him. He's not as great as Achilles, but he is, without a doubt, a great fighter. There's an interesting interaction between Achilles and Zeus. Achilles at some point tells him, Zeus-born son of Laertes, Odysseus of many wiles, I must speak my words outright, exactly as I think, and as it will come to pass, so that you will not sit by me here on the side, and on that and prate endlessly. For hateful in my eyes, as the gates of Hades, is that man who hides one thing in his mind and says another. So right away, Achilles says, I want directness. This is my way of thinking. This should be the norm. I'm a hero. I should know. We are being direct. We are being forthright. So already in the Odyssey, in the Iliad, we find that there's a character, there's Odysseus, who is also happy to maybe behave in a slightly different way, right? Hides one thing in his mind. So it is implied that Odysseus is the kind of hero who hides things in his mind, as we will find out in the Odyssey as well. Other people say the same about Laertes, the son of Odysseus, that he is of many wiles, that he is the peer of Zeus in council, The most interesting one is from a Trojan who is describing Odysseus, and he says, "Whenever Odysseus of many wiles arose, you would have thought him some sort of a churl, nothing but a fool. But when he projected his great voice from his chest, and words like snowflakes on a winter's day, then could no other mortal man rival Odysseus." So we have a very interesting character in the Iliad. Odysseus is undeniably a hero, but there are qualities to him that people are just interested about. Of course, you know very well, this is a story about the Odyssey is a story about a complicated man, this polutropos Odysseus, polutropos literally meaning of many terms, and a term that many translators have struggled with. How do you translate a man of many terms? You can call him a man of many ways. You can call him a man of many devices, of many wiles, or you can simplify and just call him a complicated man in the most recent Emily Wilson translation. He really is this kind of complicated figure. So we talked about kleos. You know that concept very well already. Fame, deeds, great heroic deeds. I want us to consider how people talk about kleos in the Iliad in comparison to the Odyssey. This is what Hector says about kleos in the Iliad. This is the mound of a man who died long ago in battle, who was one of the bravest, and glorious Hector killed him. So will he speak someday, and my glory will not be forgotten, says Hector. Let's compare with what Odysseus says at the beginning of Book 9. "I am Odysseus, son of Laertes, known before all men for the study of crafty designs, and my fame goes up to the heavens." If we compare these two passages, is there any major dissimilarity you can discern in the way that people talk, Hector and Odysseus talk about kleos?
Amy, do you want to go with that one?
Is it that in the Iliad it talks about like how people remember them after they're gone?
Uh-huh.
Whereas in the Odyssey it talks about the there and now and what they're actually doing and what they're achieving.
It's very good. So there is a different intense, right? Hector talks about something that will happen, hopefully, in the future. He talks about kleos as something that will be achieved, hopefully, in the future for him. When Odysseus talks about kleos, he talks about it as something that has been already achieved, something that is happening right now. Is this important? It is, because indeed, in the Iliad, kleos does not seem to have been achieved. People hope for fame in the future, whereas what Odysseus does is he recreates kleos. He talks about his own kleos as if already achieved. As we all know, when we revisit the past, we sort of reflect on it. We change things. We might elaborate on things. We just look at it with a more critical view, maybe. What we also see, especially in Odysseus, that was in Book 9. We know where Odysseus is in Book 9. Do you remember where he is? Like, he's beginning to give a narration. He begins to talk about things. He explains what has happened to him so far. But where is he?
Penny, you Matthew? What did you say there? Where is he?
Very good. Very good, very good. Yes, he is. Yes, he is. And he begins to talk about himself and the past. Right? He begins to talk about these things. He's not singing, he is narrating. But people have sung right before he begins to talk. Remember Demodocus, who has already sung about parts of the Trojan War? Right? He's already sung this. So we already see how important it is to have these heroic deeds sung about, talked about, reported. We will return to this idea of singing or talking about great deeds. The other thing that is interesting is that maybe he's talking about different ways of achieving kleos. Look at this passage again at the very end of the previous one. "I am Odysseus, son of Laertes, known before all men for the study of crafty designs." He does not choose to talk about himself as a great warrior. He talks about himself as someone for the study of crafty designs, famous for the study of crafty designs. Is he being ambiguous right now? Is he saying that he is literally being ambiguous? Is he saying that I'm going to choose to omit that I'm a great warrior, I'm choosing to put forward that the most important thing that I've done is that I'm crafty. Possibly. We need to take a closer look to figure this out. A great episode in the Odyssey, I'm sure you've studied in detail, gives us more answers about heroism. How does he address Cyclops? How does Odysseus address Cyclops? We are Achaeans coming from Troy, beaten off our true course by winds from every direction across the great gulf of the open sea, making for home by the wrong way on the wrong courses. So we have come, so it has pleased Zeus to arrange it. We claim we are of the following of the son of Atreus, Agamemnon, whose fame now is the greatest thing under heaven. Such a city was that he sacked and destroyed so many people. So he chooses to go pretty straightforward. He says, he doesn't give his identity right away, but he does say where he's coming from, literally. He's coming from Troy at the moment. Do you remember how Cyclops reacts? If you don't, it's because he doesn't really react. He has nothing to say to that. What does that mean? Fame away from Troy doesn't really mean much. There are lots and lots and big parts of the world in which having fought at the Trojan War doesn't really mean much to anyone. Polyphemus doesn't really know what to say in response, essentially. He doesn't really care very much, but he wouldn't know. He doesn't really know what has happened. And this is the first kind of short circuit. Odysseus realizing that his way of going about things might not take him very far. This starts a sort of a longer process, a reflection. How does one go about gaining, securing, achieving chaos? If all the deeds you have done in the past count for nothing when it comes to certain people or creatures like the Cyclops, how do you secure, how do you manage to gain some chaos eventually? This passage is a very famous one. When the Cyclops had filled his massive belly with his meal of human meat and unmixed milk, he lay stretched out among his flocks. Then, thinking like a military man, I thought I should get out my sword, go up to him and thrust right through his torso, feeling for his liver. That would have doomed us all. On second thoughts, I realized we were too weak to move the mighty stone he set in the high doorway, so we stayed there in misery till dawn. Look at the reflection, look at his reflection. Thinking like a military man, I thought I should get out my sword. And then it occurs to him, you cannot fight a stone with a sword, right? Fighting a stone that you cannot move with a sword will not take you very far. This is the moment, a key moment in the epic, in which he begins to reflect in earnest about the nature of heroism. Taking your sword out, the instinctive thing for a hero who will chop and cut and stab his way through, won't take him very far. It will leave him trapped. The idea of being trapped is something we will again return to. So this is a crucial moment in the epic. How does he introduce himself? Famous passage, great show of brilliance from Odysseus. Cyclops, you ask me of my glorious name, and I will tell you it. And do you give me a stranger's gift, even as you promised? Nobody is my name. Nobody they call me. My mother and my father, and all of my comrades as well. We know this very well. He pretends that he is nobody. There's a very clever pun that he's making. But if we think about it, is it very far from the truth? He says he's nobody. At this moment in time, he is nobody. He is nobody to the Cyclops. He is nobody to Polyphemus. Because the fact that he fought in Troy means nothing to the Cyclops. So, yes, it's a pun, and it's a great one, because he does not want to reveal his identity yet. But it comes dangerously close to the truth. What I like about this is we see this almost obsessive thing he has for gifts. He asks for gifts. He asks for gifts all the time. Based on what we just talked about honor and how honor materializes, what can we make of this obsessive request for gifts? Not just with Cyclops. Everywhere he goes, he wants his gifts, remember? He just wants to secure the goods from everyone. He's always worried about losing the gifts when he makes it to Ithaca. So in light of the discussion on Kleos, what does that mean? What does that suggest, his obsession with gifts? Yes?
So if all of their morals are the same, then he expects any from somebody who doesn't follow them.
Great. So he's expecting things. He wants to be treated in a certain way, right? He's expecting to be
He
treated
thinks
in
like his culture is superior to anybody else.
Great. The superiority. Remember the discussion about honour. He wants to be honoured. He thinks he's entitled to honour. Yes.
If he has nothing to show for it, then nobody will believe him.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. So if he doesn't have anything to show for it, nothing will believe him. So material things fall neatly into this bit about honour that we talked about. Because how do you prove that you're respected? How do you prove you've achieved great deeds? You do that if you show some physical proof. Land, prizes. If you don't have anything like this, well, who are you then? So if I return to this passage, that's what he says originally. Does he reveal his identity at all later on? Does he say anything more about himself when he's actually made it safely out of the cave and he's on the ship, nodding?
Yeah.
What does he say?
He tells the Cyclops his name and all the stuff about himself, really.
Great. What is that? We're at this crucial moment in which he realizes traditional heroism, battling, swords, won't take him very far. He decides, I'm going to use craft, I'm going to use devices, I'm going to use something else. And then at the very end, old habits die hard. He still has this very heroic aspect to him. He wants to have his name said out loud. He needs to brag. He needs to say these things. He thinks, I'm achieving the same end. People will know about the terrible things that Odysseus brought upon Polyphemus. Of course, not by fighting him with a sword, differently. But he cannot resist having this side of his traditional heroism resurface here, or surface briefly. So as I said here, even if this side of his traditional heroism is masked, it does resurface. Another great episode is obviously the one of the sirens. It's a brilliant episode. I'll read this quickly. Come this way, honoured Odysseus. This word now should make us think about honour and what it means about traditional heroism. Honoured Odysseus, great glory of the Achaeans, and stay your ship, so that you can listen here to our singing. For no one else has ever sailed past this place in his black ship, until he has listened to the honey-sweet voice that issues from our lips. Then goes on, well pleased, knowing more than ever he did. For we know everything that the Argives and Trojans did and suffered in wide Troy, through the gods despite. Over all the generous earth, we know everything that happens. The sirens are very interesting creatures. They know a lot of things. And many scholars have said, they know lots of things. They behave like the muses. They behave like these entities, these deities, that the poet, the narrator, at the beginning calls upon to assist him with his story, right? Tell me news about this complicated man. They know a lot of things. But in particular, they know about the war. They know about the war. They sing as well. Remember, we talked about song and we said we would return to singing. They sing. So they sing and they talk about the past. And they address Odysseus as honoured in a very traditional manner that his comrades might have addressed him in the Iliad, for example. No one calls him honoured Odysseus in this part of the world that no one knows him. Why is this an important episode? The singing bit. But why? They keep singing about the Trojan War in a loop, without ever ending, without ever stopping singing. The heroic world that they sing about is kind of crystallized. It remains in and of its own. How do we know this? It's abstract. It's very abstract. It's just talking about, we know everything about the Trojan War. We'll tell you everything about the Trojan War. Return to this it's very tempting. Come back to us. Come back to this world of chaos that you knew how to behave in. You know exactly what to do. You know that lifting your sword would get you as far as you wanted to go. But this traditional chaos is kind of frozen. It is being sung about by a group of divinities, of creatures that look like divinities, in a very specific part of the world. And when people listen to the song, they cannot escape it. It's an immobilizing force. Traditional chaos becomes kind of something that traps you, physically stops you from moving forward. It traps you in this abstract singing of Kleos. So what does Odysseus have to do? He has to resist this blandishment of his heroic tradition. He must resist the world in which he will be comfortable in, a world in which he knows how to behave, that doesn't have to worry about, he's going to be honoured. They told him, you're going to be honoured. We know who you are, right? It's very easy to be like, I've been travelling around the world, no one knows me, no one treats me with respect, with honour. I find these creatures here, who actually address me in the proper way, in the honourable, in the correct way, they lure me back into this world that I know well and I will feel comfortable in. But that comes with sacrifices. Being stuck in time, frozen, trapped, immobilized. Essentially, the epic tells us he must make his way past traditional chaos. He must make his way past traditional heroism, past the world of the Trojan War. Of course, all this endeavour culminates in Ithaca, the island of Ithaca, right? Where Odysseus finally deals with the suitors. And there's lots to say about the way he chooses to sort of unfold, for his heroism to come forward. I especially like this simile. Once he had taken up the great bow and looked it all over, as when a man who well understands the lyre and singing, easily, holding it on either side, pulls the strongly twisted cord of sheep's gut, so as to slip it over a new peg, so, without any strain, Odysseus strung the great bow. Okay, why do I like this simile? It might be just my taste, but there's a particular reason that I like this simile, and why is that? Based on what we were talking about, singing and songs. Yes?
It's relating song to his heroism because, like a lyre, he's stringing his own bow like a bard with a lyre.
Excellent. That's exactly right. What is he doing here? The two actions are brought together, right? Previously in the Iliad, we know there's going to be the great deeds, and in the future, someone's going to sing about these things, hopefully, and that's going to result in chaos. What he does is the difference collapses here. He's going to sing. Essentially, the actions of performing the heroic deeds are like singing. So in a sense, he's performing both ends of that kleos. He is singing, he is imposing order in his house, right? He's imposing order because he's going to kill them immediately. But he does it in a way in which he subordinates song to action, but at the same time, he enacts kleos in deeds, not just in song. So he collapses the two. He starts again. So far he's been talking mainly about himself. He hasn't been able to prove himself heroically, traditionally. He hasn't been able to do this. Now, his actions are going to be like singing. Now his true self comes forward. Now his actual heroic action returns. So we have the return to heroic action. But he does still win kleos through a trick, right? He is deceiving them. He's not fighting them in the open. He is deceiving all the suitors who are in his house. So he is still doing this through a trick. Even though he returns to proper heroic action with swords and the likes, he does that through a trick. He will do his performing, he will do his heroic battle, but this battle will be performed indoors. He will be fighting and killing these people indoors. Is that in any way significant?
Because there's no one to really watch him perform these deeds.
That's really good. No comrades around to be able to report back on the great, great deeds. There are people that are frightened, like the slaves and some people in the house, but indeed, you're not going to have the audience that you'd have in the open in an actual war. Great. Any other reasons why it matters that it's indoors?
Could it be so he could twist it to make himself look better?
Great. So he has power over his narrative, right? Indoors, he has power over his narrative. That's good.
So like they can't escape, so he can't offer them mercy.
Good. Like he's playing by his own rules, right? He's controlling what he will do. Unlike in a heroic action, in an actual war, that someone can literally run away and come back stronger. Very good. Anything else? It is important.
Could it be maybe to also protect some of Ithaca as well? significance if it goes to his kingdom?
Absolutely. So it's a very personal affair, right? He's protecting home, protecting island. It's a very personal affair, and I know war normally is not a personal affair, although, yes, sometimes it is, but it just involves a greater group of people fighting. This is a very personal affair. There's still something more that might be interesting in the fact that he is fighting indoors, inside. Think about spaces. Who is constricted? Who in a society like the Homeric one normally stays indoors? Is not really allowed to be outside of the strict confines of a house.
Women.
That's right, women. Women, right? The oikos, the house, is a woman's space in this archaic society. So by performing his actions indoors, is he stressing his ambiguity as a hero? A traditional warrior would never do this indoors. He never step foot indoors unless, he's sleeping. Everything else is for the slaves, everything else is for the slaves, everything else is for the women. So the fact that he is performing all this indoors might be suggestive of an ambiguity. And of course the major thing is, he still hides his identity until he's got them all surrounded. So in many ways, he's not the traditional hero. The action is framed as a return to heroic action. But if we poke at it, if we look closer, there are several points that make it, that there's some concessions there, that he's still behaving in a way that is not quite how Achilles would behave. What does this all tell us about heroism in the Odyssey? Clearly, there's a heroic ideal that is undergoing some sort of change. People are thinking about heroism and what heroism means. People become more aware of the ambiguity of hero, what it means to be a hero, what that entails, what sort of actions a great hero performs. We have things that we would even call non-heroic values, if we're speaking, traditionally, in traditional terms, that are infused. They're sort of into this figure of hero. The hero is refashioned. He behaves in a new, different way. So we're in a post-Iliadic world in which we are thinking about what does it really mean to be a hero? And this poem is really doing this very much. What does it really mean to be a hero? Shall we move on to the Aeneid for the last part of this talk? I know you've started reading the Aeneid, which is great. Is Aeneas a Homeric hero? What does Aeneas do? Can someone very quickly remind me what Aeneas does in this poem, in the Aeneid, the eponymous hero? What does he do? What is his mission? What is he trying to achieve?
He leads refugees from Troy to find a new home.
Great. He is taking whoever survives, refugees from Troy. He's trying to find a new home for them, which he's eventually going to find in Italy. Virgil, if you haven't yet seen that, you will see, uses Homer extensively. He uses the Homeric epics constantly and in different ways. He's trying to tell his story through Homer, essentially. That makes us think, should we think of Aeneas as a Homeric hero as well? Well, the structure of the Aeneid is very interesting. You haven't read the whole poem, but in the first half, we have him fleeing, right, with his people. He is fleeing from Troy. He's trying to make his way to some predetermined, predestined place that will host him and his peoples for millennia, right? He is leaving. He's traveling around the Mediterranean. In the second half of the poem, he's just fighting. He's found the land, he's on the Italian coast, and he's going to fight to establish himself and his people on that land. So you might already suspect this is coming, but scholars have said, oh look, the first half of the Aeneid very much sounds like an Odyssey. The second half of the Aeneid very much sounds like an Iliad, right? It's like the other way. He's doing all his traveling first, and he's being cast around the Mediterranean. He's trying to find his way home to a new home. In the second half, he's found a home, but now he's going to make sure that he gets that home, he gets to stay in that home. So people have said half of the Aeneid is the Odyssey, the second half is the Iliad. How does that affect our understanding of Aeneas as a hero? Is he a kind of Odysseus in the first half, so not a very traditional warrior? And does he become a kind of Achilles in the second half? So it's a very complicated process, but Virgil invites us to read Aeneas against the Homeric paradigms without giving us a very clear answer, as Virgil very often does. He's very cryptic in this way. Because the problem is, as I said, which Homeric hero is Aeneas transforming, moving from an Odysseus into an Achilles? Of course, he has there are differences to him and his mission, things that, for example, Achilles and Odysseus didn't have, right? He's a man on a mission, and that mission is defined, is predetermined by the gods. There's this very strong religious element to him as well. And quite often we see him as not being able to change the course of his life and his mission. But nevertheless, it's important to try to figure out how does his kind of heroism change over the course of the poem. In the beginning, as we said, we have a kind of travelling. We're travelling all around the Mediterranean. The situation calls for a kind of Odysseus. We kind of want an Odyssean warrior. Why? Because when you travel to foreign people who don't know you, you need to be crafty, you need to be wily, you need to be, to be thinking in a complicated way. That will help you get through all the challenges. But Aeneas doesn't try to hide his identity. He doesn't perform any tricks. He's actually very straightforward. He's very direct in his way of dealing with things. His perspective draws on the Trojan War, almost exclusively. That's the reality he knows. That's the only way he can deal with the world. We know that because he repeatedly mentions Achilles. Achilles, despite being one of those people who are responsible for, the end of Troy, the fall of Troy, is being brought up time and again as this kind of model of a warrior. There is a key episode. Pyrrhus, who is Achilles' son, goes and kills one of Priam's sons, the Trojan king. All this is happening while Aeneas is watching, and Aeneas doesn't do anything. He himself as a lost scholar potter, and he lacks Odyssean adaptability. So at the beginning of the poem, he is neither. He doesn't behave like Odysseus. He tries to be like Achilles, but he doesn't really succeed, because at some point he just stays put. Doesn't really try to fight his way through. As the poem continues, though, so in the middle section, he seems to be undergoing, to be receiving a kind of heroic education. How do we know? He receives an oracle from Sibyl, who tells him, go to the underworld. In the underworld, he meets his father, who gives him lessons. When he lands in Italy, Evander teaches him all these things about everything around him. You will learn about your entire progeny and the worlds that are being granted you. So he undergoes this kind of education progressively. His heroic ambition seems to come to light. It seems to return. When he is in the underworld, he sees souls. This is something you may not have studied yet. But when he goes to the underworld, he sees some kind of souls. All of them move towards the light, meaning all of them are trying to make the way back into life, which they won't be able to. And he says, what lust so baleful for the light do these poor creatures have? As in, he's saying, why do they want to come back to life? Because for him at this point, dying to defend his new home, his people, seems like a noble way to go. Seems like the way to go, essentially. So he was very confused why these people would want to go back. They've achieved their kleos, right? They've achieved this. They are famous because they did everything they could to fight. So he's like, great, why would you come back to life? This is all you needed to do. This is a very Achillean way of talking about things, right? Although, if you look at the Odyssey, which you have, when Odysseus meets Achilles' ghost, Achilles says, I would rather follow the plough's throat to another man, one with no land allotted him, and not much to live on, than be a king over all the perished dead. So Achilles has already kind of changed his mind, thinking, actually, maybe I should have just gone home. Maybe I should have stayed alive. But Aeneas seems to be set on becoming an Achilles. At the very least, that's his aspiration. So what happens towards the end of the book, the end of the poem? In books 9 through 12, we have a battle narrative. Fight, 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 relentless fighting. It is a battle narrative, which is presented as a second Trojan War, as if we have a new Trojan War. But what's interesting about it is that who are the Greeks and who are the Trojans? We know very well that the Greeks win the Trojan War, right? So we have the Trojans who lost the war, essentially starting something so massive that looks like another Trojan War. But they have to behave like Greeks to win that. It's a very intricate play with identity that Virgil invites us into. It's like you have to be Greek, you're Trojan, but you have to behave in a Greek way. But you have to also be very Trojan because this is your identity, your new identity. So it's a very intricate process there. Aeneas will start dealing with his main enemy. That's going to be Turnus. And both will try to become the new Achilles. Things are ambivalent in the beginning, but as soon as Aeneas receives a new divine armor, precisely like Achilles did receive a new armor and a shield in the Iliad, he starts to behaving in a very Iliadic way. He follows the script of the Iliad. He is now a man on mission. He needs to become the new Achilles. Of course, one major thing happens to him that you'll find out. He's taking this companion, this young man, Pallas, son of Evander, and he's trying to protect him. And this young companion is killed. Does it remind you of something? Achilles and Patroclus, that very same dynamic of a warrior, of a seasoned warrior, who has to see his close companion, a younger companion, dying. That turns him into this violent person. He really becomes, this unleashes, he tries to become a new Achilles. He starts hunting Turnus down. Although, again, Virgil tells us it's not very clear who is Achilles and whether he is an Achilles right at this point. In the penultimate book of the Aeneid, Turnus says, "I'll face him bravely, though he may be playing the great role, Achilles, armed with equipment that's equally fine, handcrafted by Vulcan." Turnus also receives divine armor, like Achilles did, like Aeneas did. So we have these two men, both of whom try to become the new Aeneas. So towards the end of the poem then, we've reached that point in which Aeneas fully espouses his Achillean sort of aspiration. He really wants to become that, and he behaves very much in the same way. And the major thing that gives it away is that he progressively gives in to rage. Remember the lack of control and the giving in to emotions that we see very often in the Iliad, in traditional heroes? That's what happens to Aeneas towards the end of the poem. I'm not going to spoil the end of the poem for you, but he progressively gives in almost completely, allows himself to be engulfed by rage. So what we have in the Aeneid is a journey from a young man who doesn't quite know what kind of hero he is. He aspires to be an Achilles, but he fails to behave like one. When the story requires a kind of Odysseus, he doesn't really know how to behave. So a man who receives an heroic education, and by the end of his arc, by the end of the play, by the end of the poem rather, he has actually transformed himself into a vicious, very angry man. So if we had to choose one of the two, he's certainly an Achilles. But he's an Achilles that needs to be educated. He needs to be taught, and an Achilles who has to find his own footing, his own bearing. He needs to find his way to become an Achilles. I think I'll stop here. Thank you so much for your attention. Any questions you have, I'll be very happy to take. Thank you.
We've got loads here. Now, this one is anonymous, but I think it's a very good question. Someone's asking, is Telemachus a worthy son of Odysseus?
Well, great. What do you think? Before I give you my opinion, what do you think? Is Telemachus a worthy son? Also, what do we mean by worthy son? Do we mean that he should behave in the way that his father did? Any thoughts on Telemachus?
Living up to the reputation of that Odysseus' name.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Do you think he lives up to the expectation?
You know, the only main thing we see is he travels around to the different islands and then he supports his father, but he doesn't do much on his own.
Absolutely, that's very true. Has he had a chance to prove himself?
Not at the moment.
That's good. That's very good. Right, he hasn't really had that chance that Odysseus had to, we see Odysseus at the very end of a Trojan War, and then we see Odysseus again at the very end of a 10-year-long journey. Is it fair to ask if Telemachus is that kind of man yet? He hasn't had a chance to fight in the same caliber, in the same sort of settings, for sure, in the greatest war of his time. Is it really fair to ask?
I think Telemachus is more of an Aeneas. I feel like he can be a hero because obviously he has that blood, but he doesn't know what kind of hero he is because clearly he's not his father as much as we want to be.
Good. Absolutely. He's not his father for sure, at least not yet, right? We don't really know what would happen in 20 years' time, but yes, absolutely. At the time in his life that we find him, he's like Aeneas. He has to leave home, right? Aeneas also has to leave home. So there's a really interesting parallel there that he needs to educate himself, he needs to learn. We might think that Odysseus has always been this crafty man, but again, he might be in his 40s, maybe older. He's had 20 years to educate himself as well. So different stages in life, not just in terms of age, but different experiences should make us a little bit more lenient towards Telemachus. I quite like Telemachus, I don't know.
I think by the end of the epic, he's evolved into a man that I think his father should be proud of, and his grandfather's certainly very proud of him, isn't he?
Absolutely, 100%, yes, I completely agree with this. He has this journey, it's the background of the Odyssey, right, but he is also progressing, he's also educated, he's being educated, he's learning his way through. It's also a man that has grown up without his father, the typical father model, right? So, most of his warriors, like we see Neoptolemus appears in the Aeneid, Achilles' son, well, they know what their fathers do, they see them, they experience this ferocious side of them. Telemachus didn't have that chance, so I think he is making his way through, and he's indeed by the end of the poem becoming a man that he has all the potential to become a great hero.
Okay. Daniel's got a question on Odysseus' conduct in the Odyssey.
So, how far do you think that Odysseus is a victim of his own sort of stupidity?
Well, as we saw, he has that side, doesn't he? That all heroes have, that sort of, this need to their own horn. They want to be talked about, they want to brag. So he's trying to make his way out of his traditional heroic traits, but not fully though, because he does that even when he talks about Cyclops. He didn't have to reveal his identity, right? So it's just, I like to think of it as like essentially not being able to shed completely that traditional heroism that he has. This aspect of traditional heroism, which in his mind, bragging about things, talking up yourself is actually a good thing. This we see in a changing world. This would have played differently in the context of war. But if you're traveling around and no one knows you, and being more careful and less maybe stubborn and a little bit more, willing to go by without, all the things that he does, maybe he could have done better. But it's just a very difficult challenge, like managing everything you know up to that point. You've been behaving for so many years in one particular way. So it's quite difficult to completely shed that. But yes, he makes very silly decisions occasionally. I do agree.
There's a saying, isn't there, the intelligent idiot?
Yes.
Still used today, that you can simultaneously be very clever and very intelligent, but also do some stupid things.
Absolutely, don't we all? I do.
That's what it makes it so interesting. Yeah. Right, Jacob's got a thought-provoking one.
So, for example, in the Odyssey and the Aeneid, there's obviously a lot of divine intervention. Especially in the Aeneid, you've got Aeneid is essentially at the will of the gods. So, by that definition, can he act morally? So, for example, you've got Kantian style of morality, which essentially says if an autonomous agent is only capable of a moral imperative and a non-autonomous agent is not, if Aeneas is at the will of the gods, he's not autonomous, so therefore I'd argue any action which he acts, he can't do morally. So what are your thoughts on that?
It's a great point. Something we also talk about when we discuss the Iliad, because very often people think, but we see all the gods essentially playing with the mortals, right? We know that to some extent the end of the Trojan War is predetermined. We know that the Greeks will win. So all the awful things that happen in between are people who are morally responsible for them. That's a really great point. Lots of people have tried to tackle this, and about the Iliad, for sure, I would say that the fact that essentially the gods, what do the gods stand for? Can we take them as the absolute controllers of fate? Who controls fate? Is it Zeus alone? Is it the gods alone? Is it something that is separate to Zeus? Something that's being discussed. Zeus himself quite often seems to say, I cannot change my mind. This is how things are. I cannot change my mind. But in crucial moments of the poem, we see him actually be tempted to change the fate of certain of his favorite kids. Sarpedon being one. He's very often tempted to change things a little bit. He doesn't for various reasons. The fact that the gods are there to influence or sort of toy with his warriors and the mortals, does that take away completely all the moral responsibility they have? Does it take responsibility away from all the actions they choose to perform? So Achilles chooses to die, right? Achilles chooses not to return home. Did Patroclus have to die? He could have stayed fighter, right? He could have persisted. He could have chosen another path. So what I would say personally, is when it comes to the Iliad, the fact that we have some sort of lines that are predetermined doesn't mean that takes all agency away from the characters. And if eventually characters like Achilles do what is kind of a given or predetermined, it's not a great phrase, but if they do that, it doesn't mean that they did that because they had no other choice, because he does have another choice, and we see in the Odyssey that he rejects, possibly regrets not taking that other path. So in broad lines, they might have a sort of trail that they need to follow, but there is agency to how they choose to behave, what they choose to do, how they choose to deal with their opponents. The Aeneid is an even more complicated poem because, as you said very well, there's so much more, that religious element is so much more pronounced than it is in the other epics, because it's all given as a predetermined thing. It has to happen. Nothing will stand in between Aeneas setting up a new home in Italy. But all the people he butchers along the way, when Anchises, for example, explicitly tells him, you should deal with your opponents in a way that is fair and spare them, and he just tries to warn him about all the things that he'll have to deal with morally. When Aeneas still decides to actually do away with slaughter a large amount of people, at least Virgil wants us to ask ourselves, did he have a choice at the very least? Many people will say that he did have a choice. Again, I'm not going to spoil what happens at the end of the Aeneid, maybe you do know, but there's this massive thing that people have discussed for literally millennia. Did he have to behave in the way he did? Because no one suggested that this was the only real outcome. There might have been a different way. Still, that would have allowed him to set up land, set up a new home. Was that the only way? But it's a great point, and I think we can continue discussing this for hours, and people have done so, especially with the Aeneid for millennia. And at the very least, Virgil really wants us to ask this sort of question, I think. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it's essentially an issue of free will and autonomy.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously I don't want to keep us from being able to ask people and answer their questions, but what I would come back to that and say was, well, can you be partly free? because in my worldview, and obviously it might be a bit dogmatic, you're either 100% predetermined in what you do, or you've got 100% free will. Because to be partly free, in my worldview, is you're almost twisting language in a way, because you can't be partly free, you can't be partly something that cannot be restricted, if you understand what I mean.
I do. It's a very interesting point, I think very interesting worldview. I wonder what the Greeks thought about it. I think most of them would think that, oh, gods decide, but that wouldn't necessarily take away all their agency away. But I do like very much the way you think.
It's like Virgil tells us that Dido perishes, that she was possessed, but it wasn't her fate to die.
100%.
It was her fate that she couldn't join Aeneas and go to Rome with him, but she wasn't fated to commit suicide.
Exactly, yes.
So there's a sense that that was a road that she chose to go down. It's a complex issue though. Right, something totally different from Lillian.
Well, throughout ancient literature, then I was wondering if there's any significance in the number 3, because obviously there's the two fates, and then both Odysseus and Aeneas they attempt to hug lost loved ones.
Probably is my honest answer. I know very often people will take the fourth option. Normally it's like the number 3 you said, right? Yeah. So normally they would be like, okay, this is one option, this is a second option, this is a third option. I'll take the latter one. So indeed, they do seem to think about triplets in threes. We do see that indeed very, very commonly in groups of deities that are in threes. There's probably something there that I haven't, if I'm honest, I haven't really given much thought to it, but I think it's an interesting avenue for exploration further. It's a good point.
A final question, if you kind of get onto this about, what kind of hero is he? Is he the perfect hero? Does he improve over time? It's just quite simply, how far someone's asked, do you find him entertaining? How far do you like the man, Odysseus?
I like him a lot personally. I think he's very entertaining. It doesn't mean that I dislike him at times. I really do very much dislike him. But I think I would like to ask you if you find him entertaining. And if you like Odysseus. I see a very strong no from that side.
They're very critical of him.
Very
Many
critical.
of them very critical.
That's fair enough.
I think I get the impression that they would make more sensible, wise decisions than he does.
I'm sure of it.
I think it's a bit humble. Do you think Odysseus is a bit of a player?
That's an interesting way to put it. Well, he does manipulate things, and he does try to take what he wants out of people.
It's like a
Progress, it's also a great term. Yes, he does gaslight people as well, consistently. He's a complicated man, as Emily Wilson said. He's entertaining, for sure. I think he makes very entertaining choices. Would I like to hang out with him? Probably not, if I'm honest. But to read about him is just it's fascinating. The ways he ends up doing things are fascinating, I think, and how sometimes he thinks himself too clever.
Yeah.
He is very clever, but he does think himself too clever sometimes.
It's a bit over the top.
Yes, a little bit. Like we could see through what you're trying to say. Like we can. Many people would anticipate the same things, but it's just talking himself up. Again, in this context of traditional heroism, when you're a king and everyone's talking to you honorably and respectfully, and everyone considers you some great person, great man. In the Iliad, there's someone who says, "Oh, if you look at him, you look like an absolute fool." It's when he starts talking that everyone falls for him. Everyone realizes, "Oh wow, he's a great orator. He can sort of captivate your attention." But yes, I think he is a bit of a. Yeah, a bit of a player is a good way to put it. I'll use it for my students, thank you.
For all his faults, he's my hero. Right, shall we give Manos a round of applause?
Thank you so much.
It's always great to hear other ideas, other points of view, and you have engaged with 3 epics.
Yes.
Not just the one we were expecting, so that is great. So thank you very much. Now these good people have to be